Hi everyone, welcome to a quick card video, and we're going to be doing a little bit of stamp surgery. I am using the Coffee Quotes stamp set from Joy Clair Stamps. This has a ton of coffee inspired sentiments in it, but I don't want the sentiment part of it. I just want that little cup. So I'm going to cut my stamp. Now, if this bothers you, you can always do selective inking and stamping, but just remember, if you cut your stamp, you can always mount it back together. Now, this was set really close together. My tip for you is to take your time when you're cutting it, and if you need to get into little nooks and crannies, bend your stamp. These are stamps that you can bend, fit your scissors in there, and then cut. The entire process took me about a minute and a half to even get this cut apart. So I took my time, just little snips here and there. You want to make sure you don't cut into the words or the image. Just take your time and bend that stamp and use a nice sharp pair of scissors. Now that it is separated, I'm going to go ahead and use that little coffee cup to create an entire background or my own pattern paper. Now I am using VersaFine Onyx Black ink to do this stamping, but I did not take my own advice and think about what coloring medium I was going to use. I wanted to use alcohol markers on my background, but for some reason my brain just wasn't working this day and I grabbed VersaFine, which does not play well with my alcohol markers. I didn't want to go back and restamp this whole thing, so I just was very careful. But if you want to create this card yourself, make sure you use an alcohol marker friendly ink like Memento Tuxedo Black. That's my favorite. So I'm just continually stamping this, turning the stamp every which way just to fit it in all those little places, making sure I have some that are hanging off the edge as well. That just gives it a more true pattern paper look. And then once that's finished, I'm going to go ahead and start coloring with my alcohol markers. Now I've got the numbers and the names of the markers I'm using. These are Dick Blick Studio brush markers. If you have another type of alcohol marker, just use a similar color. This is a dark green, basically. I'm coloring it in all those little circles on the cups. And luckily, this design doesn't have too much coloring. I am keeping my marker away from that ink so it doesn't smear into there. But now I'm coming in with a tan color and coloring in the little lines outside the circle, which would be kind of like the holder on your cup. I'm going for a Starbucks feel here, if you will. Creating backgrounds on my own pattern paper is one of my favorite things to do. I don't have a lot of space in my craft room, I've said it before, so the less I store, the more I can buy, I guess you can say. So I don't store a lot of pattern paper, I just make my own. And just filling a background with one little stamp is a great way to do that. Next, I'm coming in with this buttercream color. This is number 96 from the Dick Blick Studio brush markers. And I'm just coming in from both sides. I'm not coloring in the center of the top of the cup. I'm also going to leave the actual cups plain white. I'm not going to put any color in them at all. You can, if you want to, do a light gray or a light blue just to give that little bit of illusion. But to be honest, I didn't want to risk going in and smearing those larger parts. So I just kept them nice and bright and white with my cardstock as the color. Now there are a few cups that I stamped out that weren't stamped perfectly. I didn't want to go back and restamp this entire thing, so I left it as is. Once this is said and done, you're not going to notice those little places where maybe the ink is a little bit lighter or didn't go all the way across. Plus, if you have any major mishaps, you can always cover it up with an embellishment, or you can cover it up with a sentiment strip. So for my sentiment, I'm using a stamp from that same Coffee Quotes stamp set, and this one says must have coffee. I went ahead and cut a white sentiment strip. This is just a strip of cardstock. It's not a banner or anything. And this measures 4 1/4, and it is about an inch tall or wide, I guess you could say. I'm using my Mini Misty and my Creative Corners to do my stamping, and I'll be using VersaFine Onyx Black ink for the sentiment. This worked out perfectly fine this time. But I went ahead and cut this the entire length of an A2 card base. That way, whenever I go and place this on my panel that I created earlier, I can just trim it down with my scissors. I don't have to do any measuring that way. I can just know that it's going to be perfect because I trim it with the panel. I should mention that my panel before was 4 inches by 5 1/4 that I did stamp on that white cardstock panel and colored in all those coffee cups. I did a double stamping just to get it nice and dark. And now I'm going to cut a few of these little hearts. This is from the Home and Hearth die set from Ellen Hudson. They've got these great kind of country looking hearts on them. I love that they're not perfect. I die cut 6 of those, the 3 smallest sizes. I'll only be using um, one set of 3. But the other ones, I just throw in a cup on my desk and then I can go back and use them as need be. So for my mat, I've got this dark green mat that matches the color of cardstock. Like I said, I made these strips a little bit longer so I could just cut them flush once everything was said and done. No matter how well I measure, I'm always going to be a little bit off. So this is what I like to do whenever I want a really nice looking finished card and I don't want any overhang whatsoever. Now, I went ahead and put those on the card base or the card panel that I had colored earlier, and I used double-sided adhesive for that. I'm not going to have any dimension on this card. And then I'm going to mat that panel with the same dark green that I matted the sentiment with. This is just going to be 1/8 of an inch around all sides, and then it will have 1/8 of an inch from the A2 top folding card base as a mat as well. And that's just going to be a very tiny, slim little mat, but it's enough that it helps give a little bit more interest to the card. It makes it a little bit harder to place this down. Just take your time and kind of eyeball it as best you can. You can always use your MISTI if you need to get it perfect. Now, finally, I'm going to add a few of those hearts. Like I said, I'm only going to use 3 of the 6 that I cut. The rest of them I'll throw in a cup on my desk, and then I've got some ready to go. I'll go ahead and place these down using glossy accents as my glue to hold them in place. And I'm using my Quick Sticks tool so I don't get glue everywhere. For some reason this day, I just kept throwing everything. I threw my scissors earlier, threw my Quick Sticks tool, throwing my glue around. It was one of those days, and I used the wrong ink. But you know what? I was happy with the finished card. Now to add just a little bit more embellishment, I'm going to come in with some enamel accents. This is in the shade Potting Soil, and I'm going to put several drops of this all around the card just to help bring the attention to that sentiment, and also it's going to help bring the focus off of some of those misstampings that I did. If it really bothers you and you don't want to try and stamp directly over, you can come in with a black pen and go right over that line and nobody will even know that that was a misstamping. Now, I like to kind of give myself a little bit of playtime here. If you have trouble placing your enamel accents, put down some sequins first. I've seen another video by another YouTuber and she did that and I just thought it was ingenious. So she put down her sequins as placeholders and then came back in and put her Nuvo drops, I believe it was, down exactly where she wanted them. And it just, it's a really great way to make sure that you get the placement exactly where you want it. Then you've got a little bit of playtime as well. Once that was done, I let everything dry and this card was completely finished. It was super simple and fast to make. It only took about 30 minutes, but you do have the dry time with the enamel accents. You can always leave those off, or you can put some on a craft mat, pop them off, and glue them on, and then you can have a quick card. That does it for me today. There are a few links on the left side of your screen you can click on. Thank you guys for watching, and happy crafting.